Hey guys, wanted to share with you my research, and if you're not familiar with my videos, I suggest you go back, check out a couple. Maybe Global Geographical Conspiracy would be a good intro, just to kind of get caught up on where I'm coming from. And if you're familiar with my videos, you'll notice I have some more lines drawn on my globe. And originally I had these two lines here. Okay, these I felt were some sort of esoteric symbolism that was being represented, and you have major cities and monuments that lie on these lines. Some people call them ley lines, but I never really bought into the whole theory of ley lines, and I thought there was something more to it, and I started looking into their connections with the winter solstice and alignments by the ancient people. But never did I ever, I just never really expected to find what I have just recently found. And these lines are actually representations of trade lines, and I'm going to show that to you. But first, I just want to touch on a couple topics regarding some of my prior research that involves the definition of the Levant. The Levant is the area here, and this is known as a couple different translations, but this is right where the eye of our pyramid is here. And the Levant, when defined, I'm going to read it here. The term Levant, it was borrowed in French, meaning rising. That is the point where the sun rises. Similar etymologies are found in Greek, in Germanic, which means land of mourning, and in Hungarian, Kelet, which means the place of rising, and also the Orient, and in Latin, Oriens, which was the wind of the east, literally rising, or from in Latin, orior, to rise. And if you look at that word, you'll recognize the word Orion, and he rose from the east, and that will explain to you why Orion now has that name. I've shown before, Orion is a representation of something greater than that particular myth of Orion. He's connected to Osiris, and he's connected to the ancient heroes. But if you look at the word even Aryan, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. I was just watching the movie Alexander with Colin Farrell. It was the latest cut of every possible minute that could have been put into that movie. However, I always thought that the Persian king Darius, I always thought his name was pronounced Darius, but as I was watching the movie, they kept saying Darius, and then I was thinking Darius, Aryan, very similar in phonetic pronunciation, but if you were to pronounce it just instead of Darius, Darius, just as in Aryans, Orions, you can see that connection of that pronunciation and how it could have been manipulated over time to become Aryan when it really was Orion, which means from the east, or to rise from the east. Also, I wanted to look at the Arabic definition of the word Cairo, which we see here, which is another crossing point in our line. This runs through the Heelstone in Stonehenge. It comes through and it cuts through the Adriatic Sea, and then it also cuts through the Red Sea. This is a navigational line for trade, is what it is. It shows them the direction of the fastest straight line path to the sea, straight to Giza, where they can move on to the Red Sea and come out for trade. And if you notice, these lines, they cut through in a way where they will just hit the edges of land. And at first I thought it was some sort of geological puzzle that they had figured out and mapped the earth in a certain way. But later I realized that they had actually mapped out globally the paths of trade. And I'll go into more detail on that as we go on. But as Cairo means the place of combat, which is meaning the battle between the gods Set and Horus took place here. And if you've looked at my other videos, I discussed that and how this representation during the winter solstice, this line here, actually it holds light, and darkness completely surrounds it. And so when you look at the Cairo, you can see that Cairo is the representation of that light versus darkness area. And it is also the separation between the northern hemisphere trade and the southern. Even though the southern hemisphere doesn't start down here, this was the separation due to the fact that they couldn't enter into the Red Sea. They had to cross through Egypt. And that is why Egypt became the greatest power in the world, is because of this area here is the crossroads of the globe, or one of the crossroads, where they had to come through in order to get to the Red Sea, in order to come out for trade. All right. Now I want to get into the myths of the Hyperboreans. And the Hyperboreans were very prevalent in Greek mythology. However, unfortunately, a lot of the myths and the histories behind the Hyperboreans has gone missing. A lot of the times I've come across those who have discussed Hyperborea in detail, their entire works are gone. I find this over and over and over again when it comes to those who claim the barbarians were the original civilization, and that the civilized Greeks are merely copying what they have created, which I 100% agree with. But if you were to make those statements, you'll find that your works have not made their way through history. They have been destroyed. And Hyperborea, you notice Pindar is one of the main contributors, and many of Pindar's works have disappeared. And these are merely references to him discussing Hyperborea. But if you notice, when Alexander the Great came through Thebes, he destroyed Thebes in Greece, except for the house of Pindar and those of his ancestors. He had great respect for Pindar, and I believe one of the reasons is because of his descriptions of the Hyperboreans. And if you look at the path Alexander the Great took, he came through and he headed north. Now, the Greeks believed the Hyperboreans were northeast of Thrace. So we're looking in this direction here. Now, we can look at a map and see here is where he has Hyperboreans. And the Hyperboreans were considered to be a people who lived in the northern pole, beyond the north wind, known as Boreas. And they said that he lived beyond the house of Boreas, or the Hyperboreans lived beyond the house of Boreas, and they were like gods, and they lived in an area that had 24 hours of daylight. Now, if you think about that, and the claims that these ancient people did not know anything beyond this world, Libya, Asia, Europe, they claim that they didn't know anything beyond this world. However, to be able to know that in the Arctic regions that you would have 24 hours of daylight indicates that they have been there. People have been there. Okay? That is the smoking gun. And so when you look into it, even though they're myths, they have some sort of draw, some sort of evidence to say that there might be something legitimate here. And so that's exactly what Hitler did. Hitler believed in the Hyperboreans. He believed in the hollow earth. And if you look at a lot of the things he was into the esoterics and the Aryan race, which he believed were the origins of the Hyperboreans, and they came from the north. Now, I don't want to make this video about racism or anything. I'm looking past all that, okay? I want to look at the evidence, all right? So the Nazis, prior to World War II, were traveling the world. They had archaeologists traveling the world. They were even visiting Antarctica. They were visiting Tibet. They were visiting the Canary Islands. They were looking for evidence of Atlantis. They were onto something. They were heavily into the mythologies, and they believed there was some truth behind it. Hitler was involved with the Thule Society, which is also considered to be Thule. The land of Thule is considered to be similar to the Hyperboreans, a land from the far north. And they also had, a secret society of Vril. All this is stuff that, if you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend you look into it and build up your knowledge on this information. As I've been doing my research, I came across an individual. His name is Jerome Vahai. I tried to contact him. I didn't get any response. And he has not had much activity on his YouTube channel. However, he claims he has discovered the purpose of all the monuments around the world, and he was saying they were, some sort of ancient GPS, and they were used for mapping around the world. And while I didn't really agree with everything that he was showing, because I knew so strongly the evidence I had in my own discoveries, and you can find that in my previous videos. I knew I was onto something, but I knew he was onto something as well. And he talks about how they were able to calculate the circumference of the earth. He talks about how these sites are interconnected. But he didn't really put it together like I'm about to show you.